We build cars that inspire both heart and mind. We are Lucid.
After driving electric vehicles for 8 years, I knew I could never go back to gas. I also knew that it was time for something different, something more luxurious, something new. This is the Lucid Air Dream Edition P. There's a lot of preconceived notions and comments out there about this car, but very little from owners. So I put my money where my mouth is, and 3 months and 3,000 miles later, let me tell you whether buying this was a six-figure mistake. So if you've never heard of Lucid, you're probably not alone. They're a relatively new company. They actually got their start as Ativa, a company that made battery packs and powertrains for Formula E and other EV makers. So they've got a name and reputation for EVs and performance. In a lot of ways, that's the allure of this car. They've taken everything great about EVs, made them a bit more luxurious, added a bit more performance, and given it a style that I think is really unique. So looking at Lucid, there's a lot of cars in the Air line. This one is the Dream Edition, hence all of this. It was a limited edition run of around 520 cars. It's broken up into two different versions. You had the Dream Edition P for performance, which I have. Then there was the Dream Edition R that gave you max range, over 520 miles on that version. This guy though, it's a lot about performance. So 1,111 horsepower, and with the 21-inch wheels, about 450 miles of range. So ton of performance and also a ton of range to go with it. But again, this being a limited edition car, it's helping set the stage for the rest of the Lucid Airs that are going to come as the price starts to go downstream. Now that this run is over, the top of the line is going to be their Air GT, and it's going to filter all the way down over the next 18-24 months to the Air Pure, which ultimately should start just under $80,000. So I'm going to talk a ton about design, but broadly, this is actually tied for the most aerodynamic car ever made with a coefficient of drag of 0.21. It's actually tied with the Mercedes-Benz EQS, which, as a reminder, looks like this. So when you look at the Lucid Air, it was all about aerodynamics and how the aerodynamics can be used to maximize range. And I know it's kind of counterintuitive to have a car this aerodynamic with giant 21-inch wheels, but it was a contradiction I was at peace with. But everything on this car, from the hood scoops to the lights to the reason it's a trunk and not a hatchback, was done with aerodynamics and efficiency in mind. It's a big question that I get from anybody who asks me about it, is why I would choose to spend this much money to get a car from a company that's never made a car before. And that carries inherent risks. And as we get through this video, you'll hear my answer, but hopefully if you decide if a Lucid Air, any of the versions are right for you, you'll get an answer for yourself as well. When it comes to a car, the question of worth, at least to me, starts with the drive. So let's do that first. This is the best driver's car that I've ever driven. I've not driven every car out there, but in my experience, this is the best car. What's striking is the differences between the drive modes. When I'm driving in smooth, it feels like a Mercedes, like I'm driving on a cloud. And that's despite it not having air suspension, it just uses a coil suspension. But it feels really good. When I switch it into Swift, so I'm getting access to more of the horsepower here. I believe it's 800 or so horsepower that you get with that. And it starts to tighten things up a little bit. So you get the more power, you can feel the steering tighten up a little bit, and it drives more like a sports car. And it's incredibly fun to drive. This is the mode that I prefer to have it in when I'm driving. But if I'm feeling especially saucy, you can go ahead and put it into sprint. And it asks you a couple questions to make sure you really do want to do that and know that you are sort of unleashing the full 1,111 horsepower. The best part of it, you don't notice much of a difference when you're driving normally in Swift versus Sprint. But where you do notice the difference, and where the difference is the most apparent, is things like this. And I'm just gonna say that you do not feel the speed in this car. Like, you feel the acceleration, you get thrown back, but you don't realize how fast you are going. I don't think like a roller coaster is the best way to describe that. I don't know how to describe it being in the car, but my wife made me promise that I would never floor it again in Sprint with her in the car. So it's fast. It's really like insanely fast. Obviously, with any car, the more power you have, the less efficient it's going to be, whether it's electric or gas, and this is no exception. But where Lucid, I think, is differentiating itself from everybody else is the miniaturization of the electric motors themselves. So this is a dual motor car, so obviously there's two of them, but they shrunk these things down. They actually could fit in a little overhead suitcase you'd put on an airplane. They've gotten them that small. That lets them be more efficient and also leaves more room for battery cells. So smaller, more efficient motor plus room for more cells means more range without sacrificing performance. So this being the performance model with the bigger wheels, it's certainly not like the range king of the Lucid line. Generally though, I charge it to 80%, and that's like a solid 380 miles. And it's actually a pretty good representation of the actual miles that I get. It's the range estimate changes based on how you drive, but I've gotten really close to that. So being a new car, first car from a new company, I expected some creaks and rattles on the drive, especially when I was going, at high speeds. I don't have that at all. This car drives like a car from manufacturer that's been around for a lot of years. I'm really just impressed by how tight everything is. I also really love the steering wheel. It's like a big chunky boy with a flat bottom, and it feels awesome in the hand. Also, a really pleasant surprise too was visibility out the front is really, really good. There's some giant A-pillars here, but I don't have any blind spot issues at all. And if I did have any blind spot issues, when I put on my turn signal, for example, put on right here, I get a camera that'll show me what's in that blind spot. I know it's things other cars have. First time I've really had it in a car, and I absolutely love it. Said I've been driving electric cars for 8 years, so I rely heavily on regenerative braking. I've kind of gotten to the one pedal driving. This is a heavy car. It's like around 6,000 pounds. So there's two regenerative braking settings. The high one is really, really strong. What I do like about it is you don't feel a difference between the regenerative braking and then like the actual friction brakes. So there's no like weird brake feel at all, which is something I've really enjoyed and I've experienced in sort of other EVs. The brakes are really good here. You can tell this car was designed by car people who like to drive cars. And that's seen throughout the drive, seen throughout the pedal experience, the steering wheel, visibility, handling, suspension, everything. This car was designed by people who love cars. So being a modern EV, it does get over-the-air updates. And in my about 2-ish months of ownership, I've had 7 OTA updates. So the company is pushing them out really fast. And I've already seen things change. My very first over-the-air update, they asked me to make sure it was not connected to Wi-Fi and make sure it was not plugged in, which seemed weird. And then in subsequent updates, it was okay being on Wi-Fi, and then make sure it wasn't plugged in, and now you can just do your updates any way you want. So we're seeing things change really quickly, and the software team seems to be pushing out updates very, very fast. One of the big selling points about the Lucid Air, really any of them, is Dream Drive and Dream Drive Pro. And ultimately what that's going to be on the Pro side is some level of autonomy, 3, level 4, that's sort of the vision of ultimately we will get there. But this car has the sensors and the hardware, at least allegedly, to do that. So it's got 32 sensors, 14 cameras, and one of those sensors being actually LiDAR built into the car. And when I bought the car, and I knew it when I went in, no Dream Drive features were active. About 2.5 weeks later, over-the-air update came and hit, and suddenly Dream Drive was working. And what that brought with it was adaptive cruise control. It started reading speed limit signs, and a lot of driver safety features started working. I think that's the beauty of these cars, these computers on wheels, is that software updates come that not only refine what's there, fix bugs, but also can unlock new features. So the way it's activated is pretty much the left side of the steering wheel. So I've got a button right here. I'll push. Display in the center stack will change, showing me the cars. The next button, if I want to, I could adjust the follow length to make it, 2, 3, 4 car length difference. And then this jog dial right here, I push it in. Dream Drive is now enabled, so it's going to go down, recognize the speed limit. So I'm going over the speed limit, so it's red. Right there is the speed that I'm going, and then I can go up or down speed that I want. It works very well. It's very encouraging too to see how well this works. To think about what Dream Drive Pro is going to be ultimately when that starts to come, and it's more of the lane keep assist type of autonomy. When it comes to EVs, I think charging is the biggest concern and question that people have, especially if it's their first EV. So when I charge this guy, most of my charging is done at home. I've got a NEMA 1450 outlet that I've used for previous EVs. It came with a mobile charger. Literally just plug it in and plug it into the car. And I get about 31 to 32 miles per hour on the charge. So overnight is not an issue. It also comes with 3 free years of Electrify America charging. So I can pull into a Electrify America station, literally just pull it out, plug it in, and it'll do all the payment stuff on its own, and I get a $0 receipt. I had a chance to test that, and I was actually really impressed with the speed, but the question mark there is, are the stations going to work? Are they labeled properly? Will they be available? There's obviously other public charging options out there, and for road trips, I think that's a big concern. I'm not a giant road trip guy. I've only done really a few in my life, but I would not have concerns with a range of 450 miles that I could find a public station to juice up for 10 to 20 minutes. This guy is theoretically one of the fastest charging EVs on the market. It can take, I believe, up to 300 kilowatts. I charge at a 150 kilowatt Electrify America station, and I got about 100 miles in 10 minutes, which for my mind was really good, really quick, and in 20 minutes I could be on my way with an extra 200 miles. So obviously I got a lot of questions about why I decided to go for a Lucid Air, and one of the biggest ones is why I went for a Lucid Air as opposed to a Tesla Model S Plaid, which is, on the outside a pretty comparable car. So there's a few reasons that I decided to make that choice. First, I've been driving Teslas for 8 years. I had one of the original Model S's back in 2013. I had a Model X and I had a Model 3. I knew that I wanted to stay electric, but I really just wanted to look at something different. I just wanted to try something different for different sake. And I was drawn to the luxury side of Lucid. And I think that was something in waters that Tesla isn't competing in right now. The Model S is an amazing car, an amazing driver's car, but a luxury car, it is not. It offers some luxury features, but the interior, at least to me, don't scream luxury. So I was excited to try something very different that looked like it was competing in different waters. And that was kind of what drew me to the Lucid. And then the other reason, it's hard to fit 3 kids with car seats in the back of a Model S. 3 adults maybe, but with car seats it is really tight. And the legroom in the back of a Model S is not as big as you would expect. So that brought me to Lucid. So being a new car company, service is a concern. Every car is going to need service at some point. In my first 4 weeks of ownership, I had service come out 5 times. And don't misinterpret that as there were giant catastrophic issues with the car. This was a company that was still learning how to do service. There was nothing giant that needed to be done or fixed. They were still learning how to fix it. And since my car was one of the first that was out there, they kept coming back to make sure that the steps and procedures were being documented properly. The main issue that ended up having was some software wasn't updating properly with over-the-air updates, and one of the camera modules just needed a firmware update on its own. But being a company that's competing in the luxury space, they wanted to make sure service experience was as smooth as possible, and that this experience especially was going to be positive. So I ended up getting a phone call directly from Lucid CEO Peter Rawlinson, which I'll talk about more. They actually took my car for 2 weeks up to their headquarters in Northern California to look at it, to make sure everything was working perfectly, but also to reevaluate how they do service. And I knew being a new company that these bumps were to be expected, but that doesn't mean that this amount of service 5 times in the first 5-ish weeks of ownership should be tolerated. Now, having been in the EV space and driving EVs for 8 years, it wasn't a surprise. But anybody coming over from a luxury internal combustion company or internal combustion car, this would have been a very jarring, probably disappointing experience. But my expectation is any new Lucid buyers won't have to go through those growing pains. And I feel really confident about that after getting my car back on how good and reliable it's been. But it did make for a very interesting, first 4 to 6 weeks of ownership. One thing that's still lingering in the back of my head. So my service experience was frequent, but overall very positive. Again, going back to even Peter Rawlinson calling me, but I don't know if that's typical owner's experience or if I got any sort of preferential treatment because I have a platform. My hope is that it's the former, and that would be the same treatment that any customer who bought a Lucid Air would be. But I don't want everybody to use that example as what their experience might be, because there's a chance that maybe I got some special treatment and maybe others wouldn't receive. So I'm gonna pull into the spot right here, but I do want to talk about some software stuff. One of the coolest things is 360 camera. You can spin it around, you can see different views while you're driving, which is kind of a neat thing to see there. There's also a lot that leaves questions and things I don't understand. Let's start with the navigation. So the navigation is actually really good. Takes advantage of the 5K display. It looks beautiful and crisp, and I love it. What I don't like is hearing the navigation lady tell me to make a left turn ahead. I just want to look down and see the directions. As of this filming, I have no way to mute that lady. So I find myself not using this otherwise really wonderful GPS. Seems like a very weird software mission. So obviously software is like a giant part of this car, and I'm going to talk way more about it, but I'm not going to linger on it too much. By the time you watch this video, there's probably been like 6 or 7, probably more software updates that have come out because it's always changing and always evolving. But before I get to my final thoughts on the software, let's talk about the interior. So the first thing you notice when you sit in the car is that 34-inch 5K display is striking, and you can tell the resolution is really high. 5K is probably at least 1K unnecessary, but it does make it just look really high quality. You're also drawn immediately to this pilot panel, this secondary display that'll interact with this touchscreen here on the right. But sitting in the car, luxury is the big question. So how does this stack up with the S-Class of the world? And then how does it stack up with the luxury of the EV world, which I think would be the EQS. That's the most luxurious EV out there. So the seats are incredibly comfortable. They're high bolster on the side, making them feel slightly sporty. They're supportive in all the right areas. From the side or the touchscreen, pretty much every control you would want for a seat, you can control to get it almost perfect. I love the fact that they've got full massaging functions built in. I like that I can adjust the headrests. It's a really comfortable place to be, but it's not as comfortable as an S-Class, and the seats aren't as lush and luxurious as the EQS are. They're kind of straddles the line between luxury and performance. I think it does a really nice job with those. So those are the positives, but again, having owned this car, not everything is perfect. Let's start with the wireless charger. So there are 2 slots down here in the center console for phones. First, you would assume both of them could wirelessly charge a phone. You would be wrong. Only the one on the left does, and it does it like marginally. I tested this with 6 different phones, and out of the 6 different phones, it barely worked. I don't know if the coils are small, you have to adjust it just the right way, but my daily driver is an iPhone 13 Pro Max, which pretty much you can't use with this wireless charger. I don't know if it's too big, you can't use it with any cases at all, no matter where you have it lined up. Once you put a phone in, you have to kind of do a dance to figure out exactly where it's supposed to be. You should be able to take your phone, slide it in, no matter what phone it is, and it should charge. And you can't do that here with the Lucid Air. What you do have though are 2 USB ports, one USB Type-C and USB-A, so I have a MagSafe puck that I use to charge my car. It's not the most elegant workaround, and I shouldn't have to do it in a car this price, but it does work to keep the phone charged. So another very strange quirk of the car is the cup holders. It's got two really nice size cup holders, but they're right in front of the pilot panel. So if you put in a water bottle, and this maybe is an exaggerated example, it's big, but it blocks the pilot panel. And if you've got two here and one in each, you have to kind of go around. And these are buttons down here that you have to hit all the time. We're talking your climate controls, your settings, and if you want a 360 camera. That's a strange design cue. You'd have to sort of work your hand around it. It's something that you wouldn't think about unless you were driving the car, but as somebody who has coffee in the morning almost every morning, it is a design flaw that I'm keenly aware of and one I'm reminded of on a daily basis. So up here, you've got 34 inches of 5K display. And there's a couple things that I really like about this car. So like most modern EVs that are pretty touchscreen centric, you can control a lot of stuff from the main screen, but a lot of times it's hidden under menus. So this screen on the left gives you quick controls for a lot of things that you might need. Now, they're not things you're gonna need while you're driving where you gotta be distracted and look over. I had a short video on TikTok and a lot of the questions people had was like, well, that seems inconvenient while driving. Well, I'm not locking my car while I'm driving. I'm not rolling down my charging port while I'm driving. Those are all the things that are here, but I do like that they're quick controls and I can access them. And also being software, they could change, they could be upgraded and updated over time, which I really, really dig. In front of me is the main display that shows the general stuff. You've got your miles per hour, it'll read the speed limit. It's where your dream drive settings will be in the middle, show you some of your efficiency and distance since last charge. So this is the main touchscreen you use to interact with everything, and it's a weird shape, but it is very responsive and works well. And then below is the pilot panel, almost shortcuts to different settings. But one of my favorite things is how these screens interact with each other. So if I go to navigation, for example, and this works in a lot of different menus, you can use them together. So anywhere that you see that little bar on the top or bottom, you can drag it down. So it might not be convenient to reach up here and type, but it's way easier to have it down here. So I could type in my destination that I want. I can use this as a secondary display to see the overall route. Or if I don't want it, I can just push it right up. And again, it works for almost all the settings, including Bluetooth audio, phone calls, and everything else. It's just another way to see and interact. The pilot panel is where a lot of the general interaction happens. And I really like how it's laid out. I wish there was more here, but it does everything you need it to do, from the openings in the car, which you can control the frunk and the trunk. You can't control the doors from here. The seats to control the settings, your massage function, different themes to control the LED lights in here, charging to precondition or set your charging limits, your different drive modes here, smooth, swift, and sprint. You can adjust the steering wheel and the mirrors, your glove box controls, your AC controls, settings, and then access to your 360 camera. With this pilot panel, kind of a cool surprise under here is a bit of hidden storage. So you notice that little arrow. If I swipe up on that, I get some storage back here. I've got my glasses case and some masks and a cleaning cloth for the screen. Nice thing to have. Go ahead and pull that down and it'll come right back down. It's completely unnecessary, but I love it. One area I think they absolutely nailed is the controls in the car. Even down to the weird trigger you have to unlock the door. I love the way things feel, and they're not relying only on the touchscreen to interact with the car. So I've got redundant controls here. I've got temperature controls for the driver, temperature controls for the passenger. I can control the fans. I've got an actual analog volume knob too, which I love. I have controls on the steering wheel here too. So controls on the left for Dream Drive. And this knob, I really like how it feels. It feels really high quality. And you've got volume controls here, track, and then access to voice control, which is done by Alexa. Now in theory, that sounds awesome. And you would think that having that built into your car, you could do a lot of amazing things. Like, for example, make phone calls, text a friend. That doesn't work as of this filming, and I cannot figure out why. It's supposed to work, and according to Lucid, it should work. All the Bluetooth settings are set, enabled. All the settings for the assistant are enabled. But if I wanted to, for example, call my wife. Call Rebecca Rettinger mobile.
Calling with Alexa is not supported on this device. You can use the Alexa app instead.
Well, why have it in the car if I can't use it? So I find myself having to reach over here and dial, or just say, "Hey Siri," or "Okay Google," and be able to do it that way. I imagine Alexa will get better. I'm not talking to you. But right now, it is more cumbersome and annoying than it is helpful. Now, having said that, my kids absolutely love doing trivia games and stuff when we're driving to school in the morning, so there are definitely some positives that it has, but like the very basic stuff that should make things easier doesn't work that well. So software is my biggest gripe with the car, but it's also the area that can be improved the easiest and be improved over the air. So for example, some issues I had with the car when I got it. The massaging seats would time out. I know that's like the most first world of first world problems. The responsiveness wasn't very fast on the software side. I can use my phone as a key via the Lucid app. My phone wouldn't work as a key, it wouldn't set up. Now software updates came and they addressed those issues, which is nice to have. But a lot of things that this car is going to be aren't there yet. So software-wise, the big things missing are really the full suite of Dream Drive Pro features, so a lot of these semi-autonomous features. And a big one for me that would fix a lot of my issues with the Assistant is Apple CarPlay compatibility and Android Auto are eventually coming. They're worded very weird on the Lucid website. It says compatible, which screams like you're giving us an out if we don't ever deliver on it. But that is a huge missing feature. Also, oddly missing with these USB ports is any sort of data. So if I wanted to plug in a thumb drive, listen to music, or perhaps use it one day for wired CarPlay or have that option, it doesn't work. And I imagine it's capable of doing it. I'm just guessing, but not there yet. The software, while usable, and the software, while helpful, is not nearly as refined to the level of the competition. Sometimes finding settings can be cumbersome. Sometimes getting the car to remember things can be cumbersome. For example, if I set my profile and I like to drive in Swift, when I get out of the car and come back the next day, it's going to revert back to smooth automatically. It should save all of those settings. If I move my seat, for example, from the left side here and I don't use it from the seat settings, an option doesn't pop up to save to my profile. I have to go into seats and then save it. It's small little things that need to evolve over time to think be a little more well-rounded and ultimately have this car compete for not only the tech, but also in the luxury front. Probably one of the most surprising things about the car is how big it is on the inside. So, sitting here in the driver's seat, this is my comfortable spot, but behind me, I have a ton of room. So if you have kids, and you need to fit 3 in the back, you'll be able to fit 3 in the back here, no problem. I've got 2 booster seats and 1 car seat. All 3 of those fit in the back without any issue. But if you're carrying normal size adult or even tall adults, you could very easily fit 3 across. This is more rear legroom, at least it feels to me, than some of the biggest internal combustion sedans going. It is almost limo style amount of room back there. So I mentioned earlier in the video when I was talking about service that I got a phone call from Peter Rawlinson. Let me give you some backstory. Almost about a year ago, I had a chance to go to one of the Lucid flagship stores in Beverly Hills to look at the car kind of as it was getting debuted and unveiled. And I had a chance to meet Peter Rawlinson there. And he gave me a business card. And I kept that business card. And then as service started becoming once, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, I sent him an email letting him know what was going on, the parts that I enjoyed about the car, in all fairness, and the areas where I thought there could be improvement. And then to my surprise, the next day, I got a phone call from Peter himself. First, thanking me for buying the car and assuring me that the Lucid team is taking the feedback seriously, taking the issues that they discovered with my car very seriously, and personally said that they would make sure if they took my car for service, it would be replaced while it was away with the exact same model of the Lucid Air Dream Edition. Again, there are only 520 of these, so they let me drive a white one, a version that I didn't have before of a Lucid Air Dream Performance, one of 520 they brought down from Los Angeles, so I could have that for the 2 weeks my car was away. that was a pretty incredible customer service story. And again, I don't know if they would have done that for anybody. I like to assume they would, or maybe I got some preferential treatment. But it did show the level of commitment that I got from a CEO, and I came away feeling really positive about the brand. The company had a direction, and they knew where it was heading or was going, and they were taking feedback from customers and consumers really seriously. So that's the interior of the Lucid Air. It's a really comfortable place to be. They did an incredible job with build quality and materials, and there's still a ways to go when it comes to software. But that's not the whole story about the Lucid Air. I love the soft close. So the design of the Lucid Air, I think for the most part, is relatively fresh, but some things are familiar, and that might be due to Lucid's CEO, who, depending on who you ask, was either the lead engineer on the Model S project or worked on the Model S. And a lot of the design here is, again, sort of unique to Lucid. Now, some online, and I think probably rightfully so, have compared the design to looking, let's say, a little Honda Accordi. But the design on EVs I think is very different than the design of regular gas cars. These are designed for efficiency. The more aerodynamic the car is, the longer the range is going to be. The first thing I noticed when I saw this car way back in pre-production form was those headlights are different. They look really small. And they are actually. They're, as far as I can understand, the smallest headlights ever put in a car. Now, it's not to say they aren't bright, because they are crazy bright and they'll turn with you as you move the wheel, but smaller headlights mean less surface area for wind to butt up against it, giving you more efficiency. And somehow they still managed to have those headlights have a functional sort of air vent on top to cool them. So these wheel designs, especially on the 21s, are unique to the Dream Editions. Now, like a lot of Aero wheels, the plastic caps can be pulled out. I've kept them on for efficiency, and it looks kind of growing on me. I've gone back and forth on the two-tone design here. It's not shiny like it might look in some of the pictures. It's actually kind of a matte chrome. But overall, the design to me is elegant and beautiful. And being an EV, it's a cab-forward design. You don't need a huge cavity up front for an engine. You can sort of save that space for interior room. And Lucid themselves kind of describe the car as like Mercedes E-Class footprint with S-Class room inside. And that room also goes through for storage space. So the frunk on this thing, in addition to being powered, which I really like, is ginormous. You even have a sub frunk. I'm actually using that even more than I'm using the trunk. It locked on its own. And if there's one area of the car that's controversial, probably is that trunk. So the aperture, like the opening of it, is weird. I don't know how else to describe it. To me, it looks like a frog mouth. Lucid says they did that to make it easier to sort of load stuff in and out. And it definitely is. Like, functionally, it is really good and really easy to get stuff in. The trunk is also really big. It's got a big sub-trunk in there as well, like a lot of EVs do. And this car being black, it hides that frog mouth seam a lot better than maybe like the white one would. So on the laundry list of concerns that I had buying like a new car from a new company was going to be the build quality. I was really impressed with the fit and finish and build quality of this car. Now granted, it was only a limited run of 520, and I would assume that pretty much most of this car was going to be hand built and then crazy inspected before it got delivered. So you would expect that with these kinds of cars. But the build quality is awesome. This car is tight. I haven't had any weird sort of wiggles or gaps in the interior. The materials feel really rich and beautiful. I haven't been able to find many soft touch plastics on here. Everything about this car screams quality. And that's really what they're trying to do. They're competing, I don't think with necessarily the Model S, you're competing more with the Mercedes S-Class. And when you're competing against the best in luxury, you better bring your best. I get that's a lot of information on a car, but there's a lot to talk about here. And again, this is my car. This is a car that I chose to buy, and there's been a lot of information online from other reviewers and people in the forums and reviewers who've had this car generally have had it for a few hours. And again, this is somebody who used their own money, bought it, and has driven it for months. And when you look at the forums and you look at comments and Lucid videos, it doesn't tell the full story. A lot of people who are commenting have never driven it, never sat in one, and are judging it based on looks, appearances, or preconceived notions they have either on Lucid or on another company. And overall, I have been really happy with the car. The things that can't be fixed or addressed via software updates, things like build quality, things like driving experience, just the fun factor of the car, and even the wow factor and the performance of the car for the most parts are incredible. And nothing about any of those scream first car from a new company. And that was a huge and very pleasant surprise. What wasn't so much of a surprise was the software side. There's a really solid foundation here for what the software is going to be, but it's not there yet. There are bugs, there are slowness things, there are features that aren't turned on or active yet. And I don't want to say half-baked, but what this car is going to be in 3, 6, 12 months is not what this car is right now. And I actually think in a lot of ways, that's awesome. You've got a platform here that's going to get better and going to improve. And there's an argument that it should have already been there on day one when they're selling a car at this price point. And there's validity to that argument. But early adopters, I think, expected things like that. I was one of the first to have a Model S at the end of 2012, and I'm familiar with those growing pains. But I also saw where Tesla got with that car and perspective of where it was. And that gives me hope and encouragement that Lucid is going to do the same. And judging by the amount of software updates that I've had in my few months of ownership, I have no doubt that's going to continue and get better. With Lucid soliciting feedback from owners, asking what they can do to improve, asking how they can be better, what features can they fix, I think the future is really bright for Lucid Motors. Now, this is not a car for everybody. This is a car that's competing in the very top of the EV space and the automotive space. Like I talked about earlier, competing with an S-Class. But as the price goes down, and as it starts competing with the Teslas of the world, with the Mercedes, BMWs, the established legacy automakers, there's enough in this car to differentiate itself, to make it not only have a place amongst the auto manufacturers of the world, but also to stand out while doing it.